A little girl saved the son of the rich CEO, and what he did afterward brought her to tears. It was a sunny afternoon in downtown Chicago when 8-year-old Lily Thompson stood on the corner of Maple Avenue, waiting for the pedestrian light to turn green. She clutched a worn-out backpack and hummed a tune her mother used to sing. The city was loud, cars honking, people rushing, but Lily's focus shifted when she noticed a little boy across the street. He looked no older than 5. Wearing a blue t-shirt and clutching a small toy truck, he was alone. Before Lily could fully process what she was seeing, the boy stepped off the curb, right into the path of a speeding black SUV that didn't seem to be slowing down. Without thinking, Lily dropped her backpack and dashed into the street. Her heart pounded as she grabbed the boy's arm and yanked him backward with all her strength. Tires screeched, horns blared, and the SUV swerved violently, missing them by inches. The boy burst into tears, and Lily's own knees nearly gave out, but she held on to him, making sure he was safe. A man in a tailored navy suit came running from the opposite sidewalk, his face pale with shock. "Ethan," he shouted, scooping the boy into his arms. "Are you okay?" His voice trembled with a mixture of fear and relief. Lily stepped back, catching her breath, still processing what had happened. The man's piercing blue eyes turned to her, and for a moment he just stared, as if struggling to comprehend that this small, messy-haired girl had just saved his son's life. You saved him," he finally said, his voice low but intense. I don't even know how to thank you." Lily shrugged awkwardly. "He was about to get hit. I just ran." She glanced at the boy, who was clinging tightly to his father's suit jacket. "He's really lucky." The man crouched down, still holding Ethan, and said softly, "No. We're the lucky ones. You don't know what you've done for me." He pulled a sleek black wallet from his pocket, and started to say something about giving her money. But Lily shook her head. "I don't need money," she said quickly. "Just, make sure he's okay." Her voice cracked slightly, the adrenaline was wearing off. And the reality of how close they'd come to disaster was sinking in. The man looked at her with a strange expression. Part gratitude, part disbelief. And part something else she couldn't quite read. He straightened, still holding Ethan, and said, "I'm Daniel Carter." The name meant nothing to Lily. But it would have to almost anyone else. Daniel Carter was the CEO of one of America's largest investment firms, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. "I want to make sure I can find you again," he added. "What's your name?" Lily hesitated. "Lily Thompson." She gave a small, nervous smile. Then turned to grab her backpack from the sidewalk. She didn't notice that Daniel was already pulling out his phone and typing her name into a note. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the moment in his head. His son stepping into the street, the SUV barreling toward him. And a stranger's daughter throwing herself into danger to save him. He realized that without her, his son might not be alive. The thought made his stomach twist. He had faced billion-dollar deals, hostile takeovers, and boardroom betrayals. But nothing compared to the fear he had felt in those few seconds. He decided he wasn't going to let this be just a passing moment. He was going to find a way to thank her. Not with empty words or a check, but in a way that would change her life. The next morning, Daniel sent a message to his head of security to track down Lily Thompson. It wasn't hard. She lived in a small apartment on the south side with her mother, Emily Thompson, who worked double shifts at a diner. Daniel didn't know it yet. But Lily's life was far from easy. The rent was always overdue, the fridge often half empty, and her mother carried the weight of the world on her tired shoulders. Yet somehow, Lily had grown up with a heart big enough to risk everything for a stranger's child. As Daniel's car pulled up outside the diner that evening, he watched through the tinted glass as Emily served coffee to a group of construction workers. She looked exhausted but kept a warm smile on her face. He saw Lily at a corner booth, doing her homework with a broken pencil. Something in him tightened. This wasn't charity. This was about honoring a debt he could never truly repay. He stepped out of the car and walked inside. The bell over the door jingled, and Emily glanced up, her smile faltering slightly when she saw the man in the expensive suit walking toward her. "Can I help you?" she asked politely. Daniel's eyes flicked toward Lily, then back to Emily. Yes, he said. I believe your daughter saved my son's life yesterday. The diner went quiet. Emily looked stunned, then turned to Lily, who was now wide-eyed. You did what? Emily whispered. Lily shrugged again, embarrassed. Daniel took a deep breath. I don't just want to say thank you. I want to do something for her, for both of you. Emily hesitated. She had seen men like him before. Powerful, confident, used to getting what they wanted. But there was something in his voice that made her believe he wasn't here to show off, or to make himself feel good. Still, she said. We don't take handouts, Mr. Carter. He nodded slowly. Then don't think of it as a handout. Think of it as a return on the greatest investment anyone has ever made in me. My son's life. Lily didn't fully understand what was happening. But she could tell this was the beginning of something big. Something that might change everything. She just didn't know if it would be for better or worse. Daniel Carter sat across from Emily Thompson in the small diner booth, the smell of coffee and fried food lingering in the air. Lily sat beside her mother, fidgeting with her pencil, unsure of what to say. Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. I understand you don't want help, he began. But this isn't about charity. Your daughter stepped into the street to save my son. That's not something I can just shake your hand for and forget. Emily kept her gaze steady. Her years of working double shifts having taught her how to deal with all kinds of people. Mr. Carter, she said quietly, I'm glad your son is safe. But we live our lives the best we can, and we don't expect anything back for doing the right thing. Daniel studied her. There was no bitterness in her tone, only pride. He admired that, but it also made him more determined. Sometimes doing the right thing changes more than one life, he said, glancing at Lily. I want to give her opportunities she might never have otherwise. Emily's lips pressed together. Opportunities like what? She asked cautiously. Daniel thought for a moment. Schooling, mentorship, anything she needs to succeed. You may not realize this, but she has a spark. Courage like that isn't taught. It's something rare. And when I see rare potential, I invest in it. Emily almost smiled at the word, invest. She had heard about men like him, people who measured life in profits and returns. But this was the first time someone spoke about investing in her daughter's future. Lily finally spoke up, her voice small. Why would you want to help me? I'm just me. Daniel turned to her and said, because you didn't stop to think about yourself before helping Ethan. That's the kind of person who changes the world. You might not see it yet, but I do. Over the next few days, Daniel kept his distance but stayed in touch. He sent Lily a new set of school supplies, not flashy or expensive, but practical, good notebooks, sturdy pens, a backpack without holes. Emily tried to send them back, but Daniel's assistant insisted they were non-returnable. Lily accepted them with quiet gratitude. For the first time in months, she didn't have to tape her backpack straps. 1 week later, Daniel invited them to his office. Emily was hesitant, but curiosity, and maybe a little trust, won out. They took the subway to the towering glass building in the heart of the city, where the receptionist greeted them with a warm smile. Mr. Carter is expecting you, she said, leading them to the top floor. When they entered Daniel's office, the view of the Chicago skyline took their breath away. Lily walked to the floor, took ceiling windows and pressed her small hands against the glass. It's like the whole city is here, she whispered. Daniel smiled. It's yours if you believe it can be. Emily raised an eyebrow. That's a big promise. Daniel nodded. It is. But I believe in big promises. He sat them down and explained his idea. He wanted to create a scholarship in Lily's name. One that would follow her from middle school through college, covering everything she needed. Emily's first instinct was to say no. She didn't like owing people favors, and she wasn't sure about accepting something so big. But when she saw Lily's eyes light up, she hesitated. Then Daniel said something that shifted everything. When Ethan was born, I promised myself I'd give him every chance in life. Yesterday, I almost lost him. You gave me my son back. This isn't repayment, it's me keeping my promise to him by keeping a promise to you. Emily sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, she looked at Lily and asked, do you want this? Lily nodded slowly. I think I could do something good with it. Emily sighed. Then, okay. But no special treatment, no cameras, no news stories. Daniel agreed immediately. From that moment, things began to change. Daniel arranged for a tutor to help Lily catch up in subjects she struggled with. He introduced her to books and resources that opened her mind to possibilities she'd never imagined. Still, he never overstepped. He was careful to respect Emily's role as Lily's mother. But Daniel had another plan, one he hadn't told them yet. Something much bigger was coming. Something that would not only change Lily's life, but also test her courage in a way that would make even saving Ethan look small in comparison. And when that moment came, everything Lily thought she knew about herself, and about Daniel Carter, would be challenged. Daniel Carter had spent his career planning every move, anticipating every risk, and never leaving anything to chance. But meeting Lily and Emily had stirred something he hadn't felt in years. A sense of purpose that had nothing to do with business. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about stock prices or quarterly reports. He was thinking about a little girl who had more bravery than half the boardroom executives he dealt with daily. 2 weeks after their meeting in his office, Daniel decided to take the next step in his plan. He invited Emily and Lily to a Saturday lunch at a quiet family-owned Italian restaurant on the north side of the city. Emily was wary at first. Fancy invitations usually came with strings attached, but Daniel assured her it was just a casual meal. When they arrived, Lily's eyes widened at the smell of fresh bread and garlic. She had never eaten anywhere like this. Daniel noticed and smiled. Best pasta in Chicago, he promised. They sat in a booth near the window, and after some small talk, Daniel leaned in. I've been thinking a lot about your future, Lily, he began. The scholarship is one thing, but there's more to life than academics. You need experiences. Opportunities to see the world differently. Emily gave him a cautious look. What exactly do you mean? Daniel took a sip of water before answering. This summer, I'd like to enroll Lily in a leadership program. It's run by a nonprofit I trust, and it's designed for kids with exceptional potential. She'll meet mentors, work on projects, and learn skills most adults never get. Lily's heart leapt. Like building things. Talking to people. She asked eagerly. Exactly. Daniel said with a nod. It's about showing you what's possible if you believe in yourself. Emily was quiet. She didn't want to hold her daughter back, but she also didn't want her to get lost in a world too different from their own. And this program? It's safe. No weird publicity, she asked. Daniel shook his head. Completely private. Just kids, teachers and mentors. No media, no spotlight. Lily looked at her mother. Almost pleading. Emily studied her for a moment, then sighed. All right, if it's really what you want. Lily grinned so wide it lit up the entire booth. Daniel couldn't help but feel a sense of victory. Not for himself, but for her. Over the next month, Lily dove into the program. She was shy at first, unsure if she belonged among kids who wore expensive sneakers, and talked about vacations in Europe. But slowly, her confidence grew. She led a team project designing a small community garden. She gave a speech, something she'd never done before, about how kindness was the most powerful change a person could make. Daniel attended her presentation quietly, sitting in the back so she wouldn't feel pressured. Watching her speak, he felt something shift inside him. She wasn't just a brave little girl anymore. She was becoming a leader. But change didn't happen without resistance. One afternoon, as Lily walked home from the program, she overheard 2 older kids making fun of her thrift store shoes and worn-out coat. Bet she's only here because somebody's paying for her. One of them sneered. Lily felt a sting in her chest. They weren't entirely wrong. If it weren't for Daniel, she wouldn't be here. But instead of shrinking away, she stopped and turned to face them. Yeah, somebody did help me, she said, her voice steady. Because I earned it. And maybe if you spent less time making fun of people, and more time doing something worth noticing, someone would help you too. She walked away before they could respond, her heart racing. When she got home, she didn't tell Emily or Daniel about the incident. But the next time she saw Daniel, she asked him, why do some people hate when others get a chance? Daniel thought for a moment before answering. Because deep down, they're afraid they'll never get one. And instead of working for it, they tear down anyone who does. You can't let their fear become yours. Lily nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. She didn't know it yet. But she was going to need that advice sooner than she imagined. Because a storm was coming, one that would test not only her courage, but her loyalty to Daniel himself. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Daniel received a call that froze him mid-sentence during a meeting. His assistant's voice was urgent. "Sir. It's about Lily." Without another word, Daniel excused himself from the boardroom and headed straight for the elevator. The drive to the Leadership Program Center felt longer than usual, every red light a personal insult. When he arrived, he found the program director waiting outside the building with a tense expression. "Mr. Carter, thank you for coming so quickly," she said. "There's been an incident." Daniel's mind raced. What happened? The director hesitated before replying. "It seems a reporter somehow found out about Lily's scholarship. They confronted her after class, asking invasive questions. She was upset. We sent her home with a staff member." Daniel's jaw tightened. He had been careful, very careful, to keep Lily out of the public eye. The fact that her name had reached a reporter meant someone, somewhere, had leaked information. And in his world, leaks were never accidents. He called Emily immediately. But she didn't answer. His next call was to his head of security. "Find out who talked," he ordered. "And find them fast." He knew exactly why this had happened. There were people in the corporate world who didn't like him. Competitors. Disgruntled former partners. And they wouldn't hesitate to use a child to get to him. That evening, Daniel went to Emily's apartment. She opened the door with a guarded look. "She's in her room," Emily said, stepping aside. Lily sat cross-legged on her bed, her eyes red. Daniel crouched down beside her. "I heard what happened," he said softly. "I'm sorry." Lily shrugged. "They kept asking if you were paying me to be nice to your son. If you were trying to look good in the news. I told them no. But they didn't believe me." Daniel felt a surge of anger. Not at her, but at the cruelty of adults who would twist a child's bravery into a publicity stunt. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "You don't owe anyone an explanation for what you did. You saved Ethan because it was the right thing to do. That's the only truth that matters." Lily looked at him with a small frown. "But what if people think I'm just part of your image?" Daniel paused. "Then let them. The people who matter will know the truth. And you'll keep proving it every day." Emily joined them in the room, her arms crossed. "Mr. Carter. I appreciate everything you've done, but I'm starting to wonder if this is putting her in danger. She's just a kid." Daniel met her eyes. "I understand. And if you want me to step back, I will. But I'm not going to abandon her because of a few headlines. If anything, I'm going to protect her more." That night, after Lily went to bed, Emily and Daniel talked in the small kitchen. "Why are you really doing this?" Emily asked. "You've got everything. You don't need to be involved in our lives." Daniel leaned against the counter, his voice low. "Because I know what it's like to grow up thinking no one will ever give you a break. I had one person believe in me when I was a kid. Without them, I wouldn't be here. Lily reminds me of who I was. And of the promise I made to pay it forward." The next morning, Daniel put his own security detail on Lily's route to and from the program. Discreet, unnoticeable but present. He also ordered a quiet internal investigation into which rival had set this up. By Friday, he had a name. And it was someone close enough to sting. A board member of his own company had been feeding stories to the press, hoping to embarrass him before a major shareholder vote. Daniel knew then that this was more than just a corporate squabble. They were willing to drag a child into their games. And if they thought he was going to let that happen again, they had just made the biggest mistake of their careers. Daniel Carter had dealt with corporate betrayal before, but this was different. Using Lily as a pawn wasn't just unethical, it was unforgivable. By Friday night, he had a plan in motion. His legal team was preparing documents to remove the board member responsible, while his security team gathered evidence linking them directly to the leak. But Daniel wasn't only thinking about retribution. He was thinking about how to shield Lily completely from the fallout. That weekend, Daniel invited Emily and Lily to his home for the first time. Emily hesitated. His penthouse was a far cry from their tiny apartment, and she didn't want Lily to feel out of place. But Daniel assured her it wasn't about showing off. "I just want you both to know that my door is always open," he said over the phone. When they arrived, Ethan ran to greet Lily, holding a box of building blocks. "Come on, I want to show you something," he said, pulling her toward the living room. Emily watched them with a faint smile. "They get along well," she said. Daniel nodded. "He doesn't have many real friends. You'd be surprised how many kids only want to be around him because of who his father is." Emily glanced at Daniel. "I think Lily likes him because he's just Ethan." Daniel smiled at that. Over lunch, Daniel laid out the truth about the leak. He didn't hide the seriousness of it, but he also didn't want to scare them. "You may hear rumors," he said. "But I need you to know I'm handling it. No one is going to hurt Lily, not while I'm here." Emily still looked uneasy. "I don't want her life to turn into a headline," she said. Daniel's voice was steady. "It won't, I'm making sure of it." After lunch, Daniel took Emily aside while the kids played. "I want to create something long-term for Lily," he said. "Not just a scholarship, but a trust that will make sure she's taken care of no matter what happens to me. Or anyone else. You wouldn't have to touch it now, but it would be there for her future." Emily was stunned. "That's more than I can even imagine," she said. Daniel's eyes were serious. "This isn't charity. It's responsibility. You gave me back my son's life. And I'll spend the rest of mine making sure your daughter has every chance she deserves." That evening, after they left, Daniel stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, watching the city lights flicker. He knew he was crossing into territory most CEOs avoided, personal involvement. But for him, this wasn't business. It was a promise. Meanwhile, in a quiet office downtown, the disgraced board member he was about to remove was making their own plans. They weren't done. And the next move they made would put Lily in more danger than Daniel had anticipated. Monday morning began like any other for Lily. School, a quick snack, then her leadership program in the afternoon. But what she didn't know was that someone was watching her. Across the street from the program center, a dark sedan sat parked. Its tinted windows concealing the man inside. He wasn't there by accident. He had been sent by the very board member Daniel was preparing to remove. A man who now wanted leverage. Something to use against Daniel Carter before the shareholder vote at the end of the week. Inside Daniel's office, the CEO was in back-to-back meetings when his head of security walked in without knocking. "We've got a problem," he said grimly. Daniel immediately ended the meeting and followed him into the hall. "Lily's being tailed," the security chief said. "Our guys picked it up on the school run this morning. Same car, same driver, both to and from the program." Daniel's pulse quickened. "Do they know we've spotted them?" "No. We've kept distance. But this isn't casual surveillance. They're waiting for a moment when she's unprotected." Daniel didn't hesitate. "Double her security. Keep them invisible but close, and find out who's behind this." His voice hardened. "And I mean yesterday." By the time Lily got home that evening, Emily noticed the extra security presence outside their building. She didn't like it, but she didn't question it. Deep down, she trusted Daniel enough to know it wasn't unnecessary. That night, he called her directly. "I don't want to alarm you," he began. "But someone's been following Lily. She's safe. My people are with her at all times. But I think it's connected to the situation at my company." Emily's voice shook. "You told me you'd keep her out of this. And I will," Daniel said firmly. "That's why I'm telling you now. I'm moving her transportation under my direct control until this is over. My drivers, my cars, my routes. No exceptions." The next day, Lily's pickup was handled like a top-level security operation. The sedan was still there, lurking near the curb. But when Daniel's team switched to a decoy vehicle, the tail followed the wrong car. By the time the man in the sedan realized he'd been tricked, Lily was already safe at Daniel's penthouse, playing a board game with Ethan. Daniel arrived home late that evening. "How was your day, Lily?" he asked, forcing his tone to stay light. She grinned. "I beat Ethan at Monopoly." Daniel smiled, but inside he was already thinking 10 moves ahead. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about sending a message that no one touched the people he cared about. That night, his head of security called with confirmation the man tailing Lily was connected to the ousted board member. Daniel hung up without saying a word, then poured himself a drink. He wasn't a man who made threats, but when it came to protecting Lily, he was ready to cross any line necessary. What Daniel didn't realize was that the man tailing Lily wasn't just watching. He was waiting for the perfect moment to approach her. And that moment was coming sooner than anyone expected. Wednesday afternoon was supposed to be ordinary. Lily had just finished her leadership session, and was walking toward the waiting car Daniel had sent. The driver, one of Daniel's trusted men, was parked only 20 feet away. But between Lily and the car, a man in a baseball cap stepped out from behind a lamppost. "Hey, you're Lily, right?" he said, smiling in a way that made her uneasy. She stopped instinctively, remembering her mother's warning about strangers. "I don't talk to people I don't know," she said firmly. The man's smile didn't fade. "Oh, I'm a friend of your mom's," he lied smoothly. "She asked me to pick you up today." Lily's eyes narrowed. "My mom would have called me." She took a step back, glancing toward the car. The driver noticed the interaction instantly and moved toward her. That's when the man's smile broke, replaced by frustration. "Look. Just come with me." Before he could finish, the driver stepped between them. "She's with me," the driver said in a low, dangerous tone. The man held his hands up and backed away, disappearing into the crowd. The driver quickly got Lily into the car and locked the doors. When Daniel got the call, he was in the middle of reviewing a major investment deal. He dropped everything. By the time he reached the penthouse, Lily was sitting on the couch with Ethan, trying to act like nothing had happened. But he could see the tension in her small hands as they twisted in her lap. He knelt in front of her. "You did exactly the right thing," he said, his voice steady but his eyes fierce. "You didn't go with him, you stayed alert. And you let my people get you to safety. I'm proud of you." Lily looked up at him. "Why would someone try to take me? I'm not important." Daniel took a deep breath. "You're important to me. And that makes you a target for people who want to hurt me. But I promise, Lily, they will never succeed." That night, after Emily arrived at the penthouse and heard what happened, she turned to Daniel. "I'm starting to think this isn't safe anymore," she said. "Maybe we should go somewhere far away until this is over." Daniel shook his head. "Running will make them think they've won. I need to end this, and I can't do it from hiding." The next morning, Daniel made a decision. He called a press conference, not to talk about the company, but to send a message. Standing before the cameras, he spoke plainly. "Some people believe they can threaten my family to influence my business decisions. They're wrong. Let me be clear, my family is off limits, and anyone who tries otherwise will face consequences." It wasn't a typical CEO move, but Daniel wasn't feeling typical. And somewhere in the city, the man in the baseball cap heard those words, and decided the game wasn't over yet. The following week, the city's biggest charity gala was set to take place at the Crystal Palace, an event attended by the wealthiest and most influential people in the country. It was the kind of night where fortunes were donated, alliances were formed, and reputations were built. Michael had decided this was the perfect moment to introduce Lily and her family to a world they had never imagined entering. But he wasn't just taking them as guests, he was giving them a platform. Lily, however, was nervous. She wasn't used to wearing expensive clothes or speaking in front of strangers. The thought of entering a massive hall filled with glittering chandeliers, cameras, and people in gowns made her stomach turn. "Mr. Michael," she said timidly when he came to pick her up, "I don't belong in places like that." He smiled warmly. "Lily, you belong anywhere kindness is valued. And tonight, you're the most important person in that room." When they arrived, the reaction was overwhelming. The red carpet was crowded with reporters, flashing cameras, and murmurs as Michael stepped out of the limousine with Lily by his side. People whispered, trying to figure out who this little girl was. Michael didn't keep them wondering for long. Inside the gala, When he was handed the microphone to make his opening speech, he began with, "Tonight, I want to introduce you to someone who has more courage in her heart than most of us will ever know." He told the entire room how Lily had risked herself to save his son, and as he spoke, her eyes welled up with emotion. The audience erupted in applause. Some people stood. Many were visibly moved. But Michael wasn't done. He announced that he had established a permanent scholarship fund in Lily's name. Not just for her, but for dozens of other children from struggling families. The crowd gasped, realizing the scale of his generosity. It wasn't just a gesture, it was a legacy. Lily's parents were in tears, holding hands tightly. The moment felt surreal. Just weeks ago, they had been worrying about how to keep the lights on, and now, their daughter's name was on a program that would change lives for generations. When Michael stepped down from the stage, Lily hugged him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "but I never wanted anything in return." He knelt down so he was eye level with her and said, "Sometimes the world gives back to those who give without expecting. This is just the beginning." But outside the bright lights of the gala, not everyone was pleased. In the shadowy corner of the hall, a man in a dark suit observed the scene with a calculating look. He was a rival businessman. One who had been trying to undermine Michael for years. Seeing the publicity and goodwill Michael was gaining from this event only made his jealousy burn. He turned to his assistant and said coldly, "Find out everything you can about that girl and her family. If Michael thinks this is going to make him untouchable, he's wrong." The gala ended with applause, laughter, and an overwhelming sense of hope. Lily's life had changed forever. But she had no idea that a storm was quietly building in the background. One that would test everything she had just been given. The press conference was just hours away, and the air in the Grant mansion was thick with tension. Outside, news vans lined the street, camera crews jostled for the best position, and whispers about Emily's identity spread like wildfire across the internet. Inside, Alexander paced the living room, phone in hand, coordinating with his PR team. He wanted every word of his announcement to strike the perfect balance between gratitude and action. This wasn't going to be a shallow thank you. It was going to be a turning point for his entire company, and more importantly for Emily's life. Emily, however, didn't share his excitement. She sat quietly on the edge of the couch, clutching her brother's hand. Sam was still pale, but his smile was returning bit by bit. And that was all that mattered to her. The idea of facing a crowd of strangers, flashing cameras, and endless questions made her stomach twist into knots. She had no desire for fame. All she wanted was for Sam to get better and for their lives to go back to some version of normal. But she knew Alexander wasn't going to let this moment pass without making it public. As the afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows, Alexander knelt in front of her, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "Emily, I know you don't want attention. But sometimes, telling the truth can inspire people to act. There are kids out there who need help, just like Sam did. If they hear your story, maybe others will step up. Maybe we can make sure no kid has to feel alone in a moment like that." His sincerity caught her off guard, and for the first time, she saw past the polished CEO exterior. He wasn't just doing this for show. He was doing it because her kindness had actually changed something inside him. Reluctantly, she agreed to stand beside him at the conference, though she made him promise not to reveal too many personal details. When they arrived at the venue, the crowd erupted into chaos. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed in bursts, and the hum of excitement was almost deafening. Emily held onto Sam's hand tighter, using his little squeeze as an anchor. Alexander guided them to the stage, towering above the chaos, his presence commanding instant attention. When he finally spoke, the room fell silent. 2 weeks ago, my son's life was saved by someone you've never heard of. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for recognition. She acted because it was the right thing to do. Today, I want the world to meet her. He gestured toward Emily, and she could feel every pair of eyes on her, but surprisingly, the fear she'd been holding on to began to fade. Alexander then dropped the bombshell no one saw coming. From this day forward, the Grant Foundation will create a fund in Emily's name, dedicated to helping children in crisis. It will provide medical care, shelter, an education for those who have nowhere else to turn. And to Emily, I say, this is only the beginning. The crowd erupted into applause. Reporters scrambled to take notes, and Sam beamed with pride at his sister. For Emily, the moment was overwhelming, not because of the attention, but because she realized the depth of Alexander's promise. This wasn't just a thank you. This was a commitment that would ripple far beyond their lives. But she also couldn't shake a small, nagging thought. Grand promises were easy to make under the bright lights. The real test would be in the days to come, when no cameras were watching. And deep down, she wondered if Alexander truly understood what he was stepping into. Jonathan entered the towering glass building of his company, with a different kind of fire in his eyes. The skyline of Manhattan glittered outside. But his mind wasn't on the city's wealth or his position. It was on Emily, the girl whose bravery had become the unshakable pivot of his life. The elevator ride to the top floor felt longer than usual, the weight of what he had planned adding to the pressure in his chest. Inside the boardroom, the executives were already seated, flipping through reports, discussing quarterly profits, and sipping expensive coffee, as if nothing else in the world mattered. When Jonathan walked in, the room fell silent. He was their leader, the man they admired and feared. But today, he wasn't here to talk about revenue or market share. He was here to talk about something much bigger. He began without preamble. 2 weeks ago, my son almost lost his life, he said, his voice steady but charged. If it wasn't for a young girl, who had nothing to gain and everything to lose, he wouldn't be here today. The executives exchanged uneasy glances. Jonathan rarely spoke about his personal life, let alone with such emotion. He continued, that girl, Emily, didn't ask for a reward. She didn't seek fame. She simply acted out of pure humanity. And that made me realize, this company, with all its power and resources, has forgotten what humanity means. The room was still. No one dared interrupt. Jonathan clicked a remote, and the projector lit up with an image. Not of a chart or sales figure, but of Emily's small, determined face. He spoke of her life, her struggles. The rundown neighborhood she lived in, the obstacles she faced daily. We sit here making millions, talking about growth, yet there are Emilys out there who can't afford basic healthcare, education or even safety. Well, one of the executives, a gray-haired man who had been with the company for decades, cleared his throat. Jonathan, we all respect what happened, but this is a business. Our shareholders. Jonathan cut him off. I am the majority shareholder. And I've decided, effective immediately, we are creating the Emily Grant Foundation. A division of this company dedicated solely to funding life-saving initiatives, education programs, and safety measures for children across America. There was a stir in the room. Some executives looked concerned about profits, others quietly inspired. Jonathan pressed on. This isn't charity. It's responsibility. And if anyone here thinks this will weaken us, they don't understand the future of business. People invest in companies that stand for something. The board reluctantly voted, and with Jonathan's controlling share, the foundation was born. It was the first time in company history that a personal act of kindness had directly shifted corporate policy. As the meeting ended, Jonathan stayed behind, staring out at the city. He thought of Emily, probably walking home from school, completely unaware of the storm she had set in motion. He knew this was just the beginning, because saving his son had been her gift to him. But giving Emily a chance at a better future, and thousands of other children like her, that would be his gift to the world. Days after the gala, Emily's life took on a rhythm she had never known before. She was now attending a better school, thanks to the scholarship arranged quietly by Mr. Anderson. At first, she resisted the idea. She didn't want to feel like a charity case, but her mother convinced her it was an opportunity to embrace, not fear. Sam's health was improving rapidly, his cheeks were no longer pale, and his laughter filled the small home they lived in. Every morning, Emily would walk him to the bus stop, holding his hand tightly, as though still afraid she might lose him. What she didn't know was that far away in a towering skyscraper, the man whose son she had saved was thinking about her every single day. Mr. Anderson had been running his company with renewed purpose. The near loss of his son had shifted his priorities. He wasn't just building wealth anymore. He wanted to build a legacy. In his office, he kept a framed photo of Ethan and Emily together from the gala night. Sometimes, while reviewing deals worth millions, he would glance at it and smile. But there was something else tugging at him. An idea he couldn't shake. He wanted to see Emily not as a benefactor seeing a recipient, but as someone who deserved a platform to shape her own future. Meanwhile, Emily had been adjusting to the new school's culture. The classrooms were bigger, the students came from wealthier families, and the teachers expected more. Some kids looked at her differently, noticing her second-hand shoes, and the way she hesitated before answering questions in class. But Emily wasn't easily broken. She had faced far greater challenges than fitting into a new environment. She poured her heart into studying, determined to honor the chance she'd been given. One Friday afternoon, just as she was packing her bag, the principal called her to the office. Waiting there was Mr. Anderson, dressed in his usual tailored suit, but with a warmth in his eyes that made Emily feel at ease. "I was in the neighborhood," he said with a gentle smile. "And I thought I'd see how you're doing." Emily was surprised. CEOs didn't just stop by schools to check on students. They talked for a few minutes about her classes, her friends and Sam's recovery. Then, before leaving, he handed her a small envelope. "Don't open it until you get home," he said. When Emily finally tore it open that evening, she found a handwritten letter. In it Mr. Anderson explained his gratitude again. But this time he offered something unexpected, an invitation to spend the summer at his company's youth mentorship program. It wasn't just about learning business. It was about giving her access to tools, networks, and experiences that could shape her future. Emily's hands trembled as she read it. She thought about all the closed doors she'd faced in life, and here was one swinging wide open. Her mother read the letter too, her eyes misty. "You've earned this," she told Emily. "Not because you saved Ethan, but because you've shown the world the kind of person you are." That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She wasn't sure what the mentorship would bring. But she knew one thing. This was just the beginning of something bigger than she had ever imagined. 2. In the days following the press conference, the city began to see a different side of Richard Coleman. The once intimidating CEO who rarely spoke to the media was now seen walking into children's hospitals. Not for photo opportunities, but to sit beside parents who were drowning in medical bills. He would quietly hand them an envelope, shake their hands, and leave without telling reporters. Emily had no idea that her single act of courage had awakened something powerful in him. One afternoon, while Emily was at school, Richard's team arrived at her small neighborhood. They didn't come in flashy cars, they came in a modest van, carrying supplies for the community. New books for the school library, groceries for struggling families, and even new swings for the park Emily loved so much. People started calling Emily the little angel of the town. Yet Emily still didn't feel like a hero. She was just a girl who had done what she thought was right. Later that week, Richard showed up at Emily's school during an assembly. The principal's voice trembled as she introduced him. Everyone whispered, shocked to see the richest man in the city standing there in a plain suit. Richard stepped up to the microphone and spoke about bravery, kindness, and the ripple effect one act can create. Then he asked Emily to join him on stage. Her legs shook as she walked up, but when she saw Richard's warm smile, she felt safe. He handed her a small box, and inside was a gold necklace with a pendant shaped like a heart, engraved with the words, "You saved more than my son, you saved me." The crowd erupted in applause. Emily's eyes filled with tears, not because of the gift, but because she realized this man's heart had truly changed. Richard, too, was holding back tears. He didn't just want to thank her. He wanted to make sure the world knew the value of compassion. And in that moment, Emily understood that her story was only beginning. The weeks after the school assembly brought even more change than Emily could have imagined. Richard didn't just disappear after giving her the necklace. He became a part of her life in a way she never expected. Every Saturday morning, a sleek black SUV would quietly park outside her home. Richard would step out dressed casually, sometimes even carrying coffee and pastries for Emily and her mother. They would sit together, talk and laugh like old friends. But beneath those light moments was a deeper purpose. Richard was slowly building something bigger. He had launched the Emily's Heart Foundation, not just in her name, but with her as an active part of it. Emily, at just 8 years old, was helping decide where the funds would go. Her first choice: a children's cancer wing in the city hospital where she had first met Richard's son. The groundbreaking ceremony was emotional. Nurses cried, parents hugged her, and Richard looked at her with quiet pride. One evening, after another long day of planning charity work, Richard took Emily and her mother to a quiet hill overlooking the city. "You know, Emily," he said softly, "when you saved my son, you gave me more than my family back. You gave me a reason to live for something greater than myself." Emily's eyes widened. She had never thought of it that way. "But I didn't do much," she whispered. Richard shook his head, smiling. "You did everything. Because kindness doesn't measure size, it measures impact." That night, as Emily lay in bed, holding the heart-shaped necklace, she realized her life was forever intertwined with his. Not because of fame, not because of money, but because two hearts had met in a moment of need, and neither would ever let go. Winter arrived early that year, coating the city in silver frost and painting the windows of Emily's small home with icy flowers. She had grown used to Richard visiting often, but that December morning, his arrival felt different. The SUV didn't just carry him, it carried boxes, wrapped gifts, and a whole team of people. Emily stood at the door in her worn sweater, wide-eyed, as Richard stepped forward holding a small velvet box in his hand. "Emily," he said, kneeling down to her level, "today isn't about me giving you something. It's about you giving me something again." She tilted her head in confusion, and he continued, "You've reminded me that family isn't just about blood. It's about love, loyalty, and showing up for one another." Inside the velvet box was a delicate silver bracelet with tiny charms, each representing something they had shared. A heart for kindness. A book for the nights he read to her. A little house for the home they had built in each other's hearts. Emily's hands trembled as she clasped it on her wrist. Then Richard turned to her mother. "I know things haven't been easy for you. But starting today, you're part of my family too. I've arranged for you to work with my foundation, full-time, with benefits. You won't have to worry about rent or bills again." Her mother's eyes filled with tears as she covered her mouth, unable to speak. But the moment that broke Emily completely came later that night. Richard had asked her to step outside. The street was quiet, snow falling gently. Parked in front of her home was a small white van with colorful drawings painted on the sides, flowers, stars, smiling children. On the door in bright letters it read, "Emily's Hope on Wheels. It's our new mobile care unit," Richard explained softly. "It will bring medicine, food, and warmth to children who can't reach hospitals. And it will always carry your name, because you started all of this." Emily hugged him so tightly he could barely breathe. In that moment, she wasn't just the girl who saved a boy's life. She was the girl who changed a man's heart forever, and through him, the lives of countless others. And as the snow continued to fall, she whispered, "We're going to help so many people, aren't we?" Richard smiled, looking at her with the same gratitude he felt the very first day. "Yes, Emily. And this is only the beginning." The days after Olivia's mother's surgery were filled with an emotional quiet that neither Olivia nor Ethan could easily shake. Ethan found himself spending more time at the hospital, checking on Mrs. Carter, bringing flowers, and making sure the nurses gave her extra care. Olivia, though grateful, kept her guard up. She was still trying to understand why a man of his power and wealth was investing so much time in her family's well-being. One afternoon, as Ethan arrived with a bag of fresh fruit and some magazines for her mother, Olivia intercepted him in the hallway. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. "You've already done more than enough." Ethan looked at her, his eyes holding a rare vulnerability. "Olivia, I know you think I'm doing this out of guilt. But the truth is, meeting you and your family, it's changed me. You made me realize I've been chasing the wrong things for years." She didn't know what to say to that, so she simply walked beside him into the room. Inside, Mrs. Carter was sitting up in bed, smiling warmly. "Ethan, you've been here more than my own doctor," she teased, making them all laugh. Over the next hour, the conversation shifted from medical updates to memories, dreams, and even light-hearted jokes. Ethan listened intently, as if each word from Mrs. Carter was a lesson he'd never learned before. Later that evening, as Olivia walked him to his car, Ethan suddenly stopped. "I have something I want to show you tomorrow," he said. "It's important." The next day, he picked her up and drove to a quiet neighborhood. He pulled up in front of a large but modestly designed building with a sign that read the Carter Hope Foundation, coming soon. Olivia froze, staring at the name. What is this? She asked in disbelief. Ethan's voice was steady. It's a non-profit. We'll provide emergency medical funding for families in crisis, so no one has to go through what you did. Her eyes filled with tears. You named it after my mom. He smiled faintly. I named it after both of you. Because you both saved my life in more ways than one. Olivia's voice trembled as she whispered, Ethan, this is. She couldn't finish. He gently put his hand on her shoulder. It's just the beginning. For the first time, she realized this man wasn't just repaying a debt. He was building something that would change lives forever. And deep down, she knew her own life would never be the same again. The storm that had shaken the city days ago had finally settled into a calm rhythm. But inside the hearts of those connected to this story, the storm still raged. Emma had not expected her life to be intertwined with the most influential man in the country. Yet here she was, sitting in the vast conference hall of Carter Enterprises. The long mahogany table gleamed under soft lighting, surrounded by men and women in tailored suits, all staring at her with a mix of curiosity and admiration. Richard stood at the head of the table, his hands resting firmly on the polished wood, his eyes fixed on Emma. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice deep and commanding, this young woman is the reason my son is alive today. Without her bravery, we wouldn't be standing here having this conversation. Emma shifted in her seat, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes. She had never been in a room so grand. Nor had she been the center of such attention. She wasn't sure if she belonged here. Richard continued, and because of her courage, I've made a decision that will not only change her life, but the lives of many others. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. He pressed a button, and a large screen lit up, displaying the words, the Emma Hope Foundation. Emma's eyes widened, her heart pounding. Richard explained, this foundation will provide scholarships, medical assistance, and opportunities for children from underprivileged backgrounds. Emma will be the face of it. Her hands trembled under the table. She had gone from being an ordinary girl who sold cookies to help her mom pay rent, to becoming a symbol of hope for countless others. After the meeting, as the room emptied, Richard walked over to her. Emma, I know this is overwhelming, he said softly. But you've proven that your heart is bigger than your fears. You didn't just save my son, you've inspired me to be a better man. Emma smiled faintly, still trying to process everything. I just did what anyone would have done, she replied. Richard shook his head. No, most people would have walked away. You ran toward danger. And that's rare. He handed her a small velvet box. She hesitated, then opened it to find a delicate gold necklace with a pendant shaped like a heart. Inside the heart was a tiny engraving, bravery changes everything. Tears welled in her eyes. For Emma, it wasn't the gold or the title that mattered. It was the feeling that her life now had a greater purpose. And as she looked at the pendant, she realized that maybe her story was just beginning. The days following the arrest of the kidnappers were filled with a strange calm in Sarah's small neighborhood. Life seemed to return to normal on the surface, but deep inside, Sarah knew things had changed forever. She was no longer just the quiet little girl who sold lemonade in the summers, or helped her mom with chores. She had become a symbol of courage in her community. People she had never met before would stop her in the street, thanking her for what she had done. But Sarah didn't feel like a hero, she just felt like herself. Meanwhile, David, the CEO, was dealing with emotions he had never expected to feel. For years his life had been about board meetings, stock reports, and business expansions. Now, he found himself thinking about Sarah more than his work. Not in a business sense, but in a deeply human way. She had risked herself for his son. And that truth stayed in his mind like an echo that wouldn't fade. He decided he wanted to do something more for her. Not just a one-time reward, but something that would change her life the way she had changed his. One afternoon, David called his assistant and told her to prepare a meeting with his foundation team. We're starting a new scholarship program, he said. I want the first recipient to be Sarah. Full education, all expenses covered, school, college, whatever she wants to pursue. His assistant was surprised. Sir, you've never personally picked a recipient before. David smiled. That's because I've never met anyone like Sarah before. When David and his son arrived at Sarah's home to tell her the news, her mother answered the door. The look on her face when David explained the scholarship was priceless. Shock, relief, and overwhelming gratitude all rolled into one. Sarah stood silently, her eyes wide, as the weight of his words sank in. You mean, I can go to college? She asked, almost in disbelief. David nodded. Not just college. Anywhere your dreams take you. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. For years she had silently accepted that her family could never afford higher education. Now, in one moment, her future had shifted from uncertain to limitless. She hugged David's son first, then David himself. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. David replied, "You already have. You saved my son. This is just me trying to even the score." That night, Sarah lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened in the past weeks. Fear, danger, bravery, and now hope. It felt like her life had turned into a story someone might read in a book. But to her, it was real. And she realized something important: sometimes, the moments that scare us the most are the ones that end up shaping us into who we're meant to be. The air inside the boardroom was heavy, almost suffocating. Everyone knew this wasn't just another business decision. It was the kind of moment that could either save hundreds of jobs or destroy everything they had worked for. Outside, a storm raged over New York, lightning streaking across the skyline as if the city itself was on edge. The CEO sat at the head of the long glass table, his hands clasped tightly, eyes fixed on the documents before him. Across from him sat the investors, stone-faced, unyielding, their pens ready to sign off on a decision that would change lives forever. But in the back of his mind, he wasn't thinking about contracts or profit margins. He was thinking about the little girl who had once stepped into his life, soaked from the rain, her eyes full of courage. He remembered her words that day, simple but unshakable. "Sometimes doing the right thing is worth more than anything else." Those words had been the compass guiding him ever since, and now, in this moment of crisis, he knew exactly what needed to be done. He stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I will not sell this company," he said firmly, his voice echoing in the silent room. "I don't care about your short-term profits. We're building something bigger than numbers on a spreadsheet. We're building hope." The investors exchanged looks of disbelief. One of them leaned forward. "Do you realize what you're risking? You could lose everything." The CEO didn't flinch. "I already almost lost everything once. A little girl reminded me that the measure of a man isn't how much he earns but how much he gives. I will not betray that lesson." The tension was unbearable. Seconds stretched into minutes. Then, one by one, the investors began lowering their pens. One of them, an older man with silver hair, finally spoke. "If you're willing to risk it all for something you believe in, maybe it's worth standing with you." Another followed. And another. In the span of a few heartbeats, the tide had turned, the deal was off, the company was safe. Later that night, as the storm outside cleared and the city lights shimmered in the puddles, the CEO found himself outside the hospital once again. He wasn't there for business. He was there because he had made a promise. To always remember the people who gave him strength when he had none. He stepped inside and walked toward the familiar room where the little girl's brother was recovering. She looked up from her chair when she saw him, her eyes widening. "You look tired," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I feel alive." And then, in a voice full of quiet certainty, he added, "Today, I kept my promise." The girl didn't say anything, she just smiled, and in that smile was all the gratitude, trust, and hope that had been built between them since the day fate had brought them together. The night was calm, but inside both their hearts, there was a storm of emotion. A storm that no longer brought fear, but a reminder of how far they had come, and how much further they still could go. That the day had finally come for the foundation's biggest launch event. The city's largest auditorium was packed, cameras flashing, reporters buzzing. It wasn't just a charity announcement. It was a promise that would change countless lives. The CEO stood at the podium, his son sitting proudly in the front row, and beside him, the little girl who had unknowingly changed the course of his life forever. She had no idea what he was about to say. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began. "You all know me as a businessman, but today, I stand here as a father, and as a man who learned the true meaning of gratitude from a child." He gestured to her, and the massive LED screen behind him lit up with a photo of her holding his unconscious son that night in the rain. The crowd gasped. He told the world how she had risked everything to save his son, how she asked for nothing in return, and how she reminded him of the value of kindness in a world obsessed with wealth. Then, he dropped the news that stunned everyone. The new children's hospital they were building would bear her name, fully funded and equipped to treat kids free of charge. The girl's eyes widened as the crowd erupted in applause. Tears streamed down her face, but she quickly wiped them, looking at the CEO in disbelief. She had never imagined her small act of courage would ripple so far. After the speeches he came to her, knelt to her height, and said softly, "This is only the beginning. You've given me back my son. Now let me give countless children a chance to live. She didn't know what to say, so she simply hugged him. Feeling the warmth of a man who now saw her not as a stranger, but as family. 2 months had passed since that unforgettable night. The new children's hospital was complete. A towering building filled with light, laughter, and hope. On opening day, the CEO invited the girl and her family as the guests of honor. She stood at the entrance, staring in awe at the giant golden letters above the doors. The Lily Grace Children's Hospital. Her name would forever be a beacon for every child who entered. Inside, doctors and nurses moved with purpose, families smiled with relief, and the scent of fresh paint mingled with the sound of children playing. The CEO walked beside her, pointing out the wards, the playground, and the research center they had built to fight rare diseases. "This is all because of you," he said. She shook her head, still unable to believe it, but deep inside she knew it was true. One act of kindness had changed not only his life but thousands of others. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, the CEO's son handed her the scissors, saying, "You saved me. Now you save them." The crowd cheered as she cut the ribbon, marking the beginning of a new chapter for so many children. As balloons filled the sky and camera flashes lit the moment, the CEO whispered to her, "Remember, Lily, miracles aren't found. They're made." She smiled, knowing this was the kind of miracle that would never fade. Subscribe the channel. Thanks for watching.